Some of the most overrated Zelda games include games like Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time. Games that the general public and rating boards almost view as flawless. These games, naturally, are not flawless and have issues. And when specifically talking about Ocarina of Time, people bring up Link to the Past as an alternative instead. I make that sound a lot more civil than it actually is. Link to the Past fans often dislike Ocarina of Time to throwing the game a lot of shade overall. When they turn around and act like Link to the Past is a perfect game, this sadly makes Link to the Past slightly seem overrated at the end of the day as well. I'm more than willing to say that OOT and Link to the Past are perfectly playable and enjoyable video games for their different reasons. However, when I first played Link to the Past, I really didn't like it all that much. I felt the game was a great game, but I had a few issues with it that hit a lot of pet peeves of mine. Overall, despite not really enjoying the game, I still felt it was a fine Zelda game, and a fun game for the Super Nintendo lineup. Still, that was the only complete playthrough that I did for the game. I can't even remember fully why I was so bent out of shape about it anymore. Well, another playthrough later, and now I'm ready to talk about the game I missed in my childhood. The lost Super Nintendo game in my lineup, A Link to the Past. So let's dive right in. We aren't exactly dealing with Ganondorf this time around, rather just him as his evil pig monster form. So let's do it. Let's take on Ganon! So the story tells of a time when evil men gained the power of the Triforce. 6 powerful wise sages managed to seal Ganondorf into the Sacred Realm. The Sacred Realm came up in Ocarina of Time as the land sealed away to protect the Triforce. Now it is a land of darkness, due to sealing Ganon into the place for so long. Years later, we meet Link. He's living with his uncle, and, he's giving an emergency dream broadcast from Zelda. His uncle tells Link to stay home, and he'll handle this. Naturally, Link doesn't do this and sneaks into the castle, finding his dying uncle relatively quickly. He gets a sword and finds out the king is also dead and manages to rescue Zelda. Taking her to the church of sorts, Link must find a master sword, the powerful blade, to stop Ganon's newest vessel. This guy's name isn't the easiest to spell or pronounce, so I'm just going to call him Proto-Ganondorf, even though he isn't technically Ganondorf per se. Anyway, Proto-Ganondorf has taken over the guards and corrupted them, so Link is basically a criminal at this point. This is, of course, not something that was going to stop Link from finding allies and getting mythical gemstones that lead to the Master Sword. Oops! Zelda is kidnapped again. After storming the castle in a game of energy tennis, Proto-Ganondorf opens a portal to the Dark World. Whoops, that's what you're supposed to stop. So here's the deal. Ganon has kidnapped several young maidens who are all related to the wise sages of the past. Using them in Zelda, Ganon wants to open the Dark World and allow him to take over the World of the Light pretty easily. This is where Link comes in. He goes and saves all the maidens in an open-ended order. He eventually also saves Zelda, and with her powers, storms Ganon's tower. After one hell of a gauntlet, Ganon challenges Link one last time. Link manages to slay Ganon once and for all, and touches the Triforce, making a good wish instead of an evil one. This fixes up the Dark World and brings some people back to life. Overall, it is a simple story, but the writing is actually really good. Characters act appropriately, and the story adds great lore to the Zelda universe, working well with the 2 games previous to this, and even future games. Hell, this format of storytelling is borrowed by many other Zelda games, including Link Between Worlds, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and even Twilight Princess. Another thing that those future games borrow a lot of is the music. There are some real classic tunes here that are reused and updated in plenty of future titles. Hey, if it isn't broke, right? The music is great as per Super Nintendo standard. The graphics are pretty great here too. The characters look unique, some of the best designs for monsters and boss fights in the entire series, if I'm going to be honest, and the locations mostly look unique. Sometimes it gets easy to get lost in certain areas, but not super terrible, and there is a map after all. Overall, the graphics and music work really well here. Sound effects are also really good, and such small details like secret walls you can bomb are very present. The only real weird thing is Link's pink hair. I think it was to demonstrate the color prowess of the SNES, but that was highly unneeded with how great the boss fights actually look in this game. Hell, Link's pink hair is probably why I thought his name was Zelda and that he was a girl, and that this was a girl's game and not a boy's one. I was so naive in my youth. It is honestly a shame too, because this game is pretty fun to play. The tools Link gets are pretty typical, but this is the first game to bring in things like the hookshot. The tools are fun, like the fire rod, the ice rod, some spells, a lantern, bottles, which were new to the series here, and a few other fun toys. The swordplay, though, this is where things get a little weaker. Link is left-handed. As such, the sword swings to the left. This is a tad bit of an issue. Link is pretty wide open on his right side. This is actually a huge issue because it leaves you so wide open that it's actually hard to position Link where you need to go to, actually kill an enemy. You can also get ganged up on pretty easily too. While Link has invincibility frames, it can be very difficult to get away. This is especially annoying with multiple enemies, traps, or anything else that wants Link dead. There are also a lot of enemies that want to test Link's abilities with a sword. Yeah, and sadly, Link isn't super equipped to handle them. Oh, don't get me wrong, the other items can totally help, but, the boomerang and the arrows, it can still be a really rough time when you're trying to find an item that's right for that situation. It is, however, something you can get used to. It isn't the end of the world, it can just be really frustrating, especially for beginners. That being said, I wouldn't recommend this game to beginners either. This game can be incredibly rough and unforgiving, and that isn't just the gameplay I'm talking about here. So, in most Zelda games, you cut grass and get healing items like hearts and whatnot. This game is a bit spotty on that. You can get hearts from grass, sure. You are more likely to find hidden enemies and traps that are great at doing damage. Even when you do find an item, it may not be a heart or even a fairy. Also, in moving jars and stuff to find health in dungeons, you can really only do so once per jar. They don't reset unless you leave the dungeon. This can make this game incredibly difficult when trying to learn the controls and the fighting mechanics. There are also some places where if you didn't restore your magic, you have to exit the dungeon and come back. Happens with some of the later boss fights, just a warning. I guess I should have predicted the need for magic or found the upgrade earlier. Oops, silly me. This can be frustrating, especially in a tougher and longer than normal dungeon. The rest of the game is challenging. Not like the previous things I mentioned. I meant challenging in a fun way. Look, yeah, there are some large flaws, but overall the boss fights and the dungeons are really super fun to face off with and rewarding to beat. I have no issues with challenge. I love Cuphead after all. So when this game has fair and honest challenge, I think it's almost more rewarding than any of the other Zelda games. You can also choose which dungeon you tackle first. After the fourth dungeon, the world just kind of opens up, allowing you to pick your own dungeons. That's awesome. You just have to travel through the overworld, which can be a pain, but luckily the map function is pretty good compared to earlier Zelda games. Yeah, I get lost in this overworld pretty easily. I'm not sure if it's, similar grass plains or if somewhat cramped layouts are to blame, but I get lost pretty easily. However, using the map fixes any issues I may have here. It is that simple. There are a few times it can still be rough, going with finding secret portals between the light and the dark world, though. Overall, I'd say outside of the smaller issues, the overworld and the dungeons are pretty good. The smaller issues add up to some frustrations, however, especially on your first few playthroughs. Thankfully, if you're lucky, you can find items to help resolve a lot of those issues. Some of these items are cryptic as all hell to find, but rewarding nonetheless. Pieces of heart for general exploration and minigames are of course a thing in this game. Naturally, improving your health bar is always a good thing. Once you get the Master Sword, you can upgrade it twice, which is awesome. You can get a cape that makes you invulnerable if you have magic, and a cane that does something similar. You can find spells on the overworld, which are screen nukes to deal with bosses or all the enemies in a room at the cost of a lot of magic. You can find a bat creature to curse you to be more efficient with magic, having all the power you have on items and spells. There are also plenty of fairy fountains littered throughout the overworld for quick healing, and this is the first game to my knowledge to utilize bottles for fairies. You can also upgrade bombs and arrows to carry more, your boomerang, and even your shield. A lot to do on the side of this game. Some of it you will almost need just to survive, especially your first couple of playthroughs, but most of this stuff is fun and to find and discover on your own. A Link to the Past is a very challenging game that I think beginners of the series should steer clear from. It's not super challenging, but it's challenging enough to be frustrating in some spots. However, that being said, the game is very rewarding because of this. There are things that frustrate when playing the game for sure. The combat is a bit dated in my opinion, and the level design makes recovering hearts more challenging than it really should be. Still, the levels, bosses, gameplay, and especially the side quest, writing, music, graphics, the game sings on these fronts very well. I think Link to the Past is great, and if I had to pick which one is better, Ocarina of Time or Link to the Past, I could probably recommend Link to the Past just a tad bit more. Still, both games do a good job of accomplishing what they set out to do. A Link to the Past gets an 8 out of 10 from me. I highly recommend playing this game, either from the Switch SNES online service, the Wii U Virtual Console, the SNES Mini, the 3DS Virtual Console, or the original SNES game. Yeah, this game is pretty accessible anymore, and if you have almost anything recent from Nintendo console-wise, yeah, you have access to Link to the Past. It's a popular game and there is a good reason for sure. However, this is only the start of this month of Zelda that I decided to do, and all of them are going to be 2D Zelda games. Actually, everything I have left outside of Breath of the Wild is a 2D Zelda game, so there's that. Oh well. Next game for this marathon is Oracle of Seasons. Can I use the seasons in a fun game? Huh? Is it a 2D portable Zelda game I'm actually played as a kid? Did I fix my new laptop up so it's easier and more convenient to record off my 3DS? All of this will be answered, but the answer is probably yes to most of it, if not all of it. Hopefully you'll enjoy my next video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell if you want to see it. Hopefully you enjoyed this one as well. I will see you guys in Holodrum next time. Until then, take care, my minions.